So we'll kick off this. This is sort of a session to talk about resources available through the CCTS to help support your research, but also a discussion on the important facets of patient recruitment and the tools that are available to help assist with rare disease research. So, but I do, I think that the speakers would agree that if you have a question, feel free to pose that question to steer the conversation where the audience would like to see it go. So I'll pass it off. Here.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. I'm Mike Pear. I'm in the Division of Infectious Disease here. Maybe we should introduce ourselves first. Peter?
I'm Peter MB in the Department of Biomedical Informatics.
And I'm Rose Hallern, and I'm Director for Participant Recruitment and Retention from the CCTS. So I can help you with your recruiting those participants that you need in order for those important studies to actually take place.
All right, I'll start off and just let you know, I came here in '81 with the AIDS epidemic, and just because I had been trained as a virologist, I was designated as the person to work with HIV. And at that time, it was a pretty rare disease. And as the epidemic gradually exploded, I realized that there was going to be a lot of research opportunities there. And so became more and more involved and worked on ways to recruit patients for this, which was an uncommon disease back then. And so I think the first step, if you want to convince people to be in your studies, they need to believe in you. And so to believe in you, you have to know what you're talking about. And I think the first thing you have to realize is that you have to become pretty much an expert in whatever you're recruiting for, whatever disease, that particularly rare diseases. You have to know the field. You have to be able to convey that to them. You have to be able to convey that to the medical community, because you're going to want the medical community behind you in this regard. So you have to be really up to date on this and make it known that you are the expert in this unusual condition. And so back then, I think I talked at every hospital within 100 miles of Columbus between 82 and 89. That every grand rounds I could give, I went there and I made it known that this is something I was very familiar with, that I was expert with. Most people were not. If they wanted to refer somebody, they should send them to me. And so local grand rounds, literally anybody would stop and listen to me. I would talk to about it to actually get referrals, to get patients to come to see me. And then not every disease has this opportunity, but getting involved with public health departments, State Department of Health, City, County Department of Health, talk to those individuals so they know that you're the expert as well, so that everybody is feeding patients towards you or for an unusual condition. On the website, although that's a more recent innovation, where it lists your name, you put down the disease you're recruiting for, that rare disease that you are the expert in, to be sure that when people are just looking it up or Googling this disease, they come up with your name so that you can localize it, so that they can send them to you. But in the end, you want not only the community to understand that you're expert, but you want the local medical community, not the patient community, but the medical community, to ask you questions, to send you patients, to help you figure things out. And that builds the practice. So that's talking to the healthcare community and getting referrals from the healthcare community. Next is involving the involved community, and there was a lot of talk earlier today about this. And this is where Rose kind of works some of her magic about going to different community groups to find out what their interests are or where they look, if they're interested in studies, to kind of fine-tune her recruitment information. And so clearly talking to local support groups, I would have the health department publicize a talk on HIV in 1987 before there were any treatments, that I was going to come and talk on whoever would, whatever involved community was there, and there were a lot of people who would attend those meetings. So I'd work with the public health people as well, and to kind of advertise it for me. I found local community support groups. That's a critical thing. Again, you've heard about that earlier today. The person that has the web page for the disease that you work with should know your name. They should have a link to you, so that when people who have that illness look to them, they say, oh, Dr. So-and-so at Ohio State is an expert in this, is willing to see you. The willing to see you is another complicated thing. Clearly, for a clinician, you don't always welcome a large population because you're busy in the lab or you're busy in the hospital, and it's difficult to collect a large population of patients. But if you want to do rare disease research, if you want to have a population to study, you need to be up front. You need to be involved with seeing them. They need to know that they can come to you and trust your judgment about what would be reasonable studies for them. So talking to any local support groups is critical. Rose will talk a little bit more about social media. That was after my days, but that clearly, when we want to recruit not rare conditions, but we want to recruit 150 or 200 people into a prevention trial of HIV, getting social media out there is what really works. I mean, we've recruited in Columbus, Ohio, more than like San Francisco did for an HIV vaccine study, because we had good advertisements, and we're in the Midwest where people aren't as jaded, say, as they are maybe on the coast, and so we can recruit better here. But the social media was very helpful. Facebook, connections, putting the trials out there. I mean, Rose will talk more about that. Catchy posters. Again, Rose is maybe going to talk a little bit about that, but catchy posters that were up in the clinic that people just stop and look at while they're in the waiting room, in the exam room while they're waiting for you, because they always are. They'll read things that catch their eye, and again, if you select studies that you feel comfortable about, then you can recruit them using those posters. And then when I have the patients in the room, I usually somehow relate the latest research to their particular problem. Oh, you have this aspect of this disease. They've been working on a treatment for that. And this is kind of where it's going. And it is not uncommon that I'll use the expression, at the AIDS meeting last month or 3 months ago, they showed this that would be of interest to them, to let them know. And then I have study posters about the studies that I think interest them. And then I don't actually get the consents for any of the studies. I don't want people to feel that I'm pressuring them to do studies. That's not right. I may tell them that this is a study that we're doing that they might be interested in, and if they're at all interested in, here's the nurse's name or the study coordinator's name that they can talk to. And so I'll refer them down the hall to the study coordinator who knows it. And then I think my last bullet is having a study coordinator. You can't do it all. Having study coordinators who are expert in the field as well, who have, through experience, become very familiar with the condition and side effects and what really people need in terms of their illness. Having those knowledgeable coordinators is a critical aspect as well. So with that, is any questions? It's kind of a general thing that you may be familiar with, but again, you gotta, they have to think of you. When they think about their illness, they need to think about the provider and what they can help them with. Rose?
I think I'm next.
You are
If
next.
if you want to
Oh,
bump me out there.
one more. It didn't advance. There you go.
Okay, so I handed out to everyone here, and if you didn't get it, there's a basket of just handouts that are about the services that are available to you through the CCTS for the recruitment of participants for any of your studies. So how many of you in the room here are actually currently recruiting for active studies? Okay, so if you're not now, you certainly will be or have been in the past, so you know that recruitment is quite a challenge. And then when you talk about rare disease, we're talking about, perhaps this is even a harder challenge. And I will say that there are some recruitment challenges that are part of the rare disease studies that aren't as prevalent in every other disease that may come through the door. I see about 37 research teams each month who come in for recruitment consultations. So if you haven't been, and there's some faces out here that I have not seen, and perhaps I haven't seen your study coordinators if you have them either, make an appointment. So I guess, as Jeff knows, I can talk for a couple hours about recruitment strategies and recruitment services that we offer, and I have about 8 minutes now. So that's why I made the sheet for you, so that you know that there are some really standard things that I would suggest. We have something called Research Match, which is a national registry for potential volunteers who may be in that registry, who you can use Research Match at no cost. There's something called Study Search, in which we list many, but not every single study that is ongoing currently at The Ohio State University. Those two are at no cost to you, to list your studies or to use Research Match. And on the flip side of the sheet there, we'll give you a little bit of the explanation of the difference between Research Match and Study Search. We also have something called the 293 Hero Line, where the general public calls in to our center, and we answer that phone and help them connect to a study that they may be looking for. But we need to know that your study even exists if we're going to send them your way. But so, yes, there are recruitment challenges with rare disease, and the study design is often a big part of that challenge, because sometimes when I see these studies come into our office that are looking for assistance with recruitment, I'm amazed at the burden that they have, the way that the study has been designed, and the burden that is going to be placed upon the potential participants in these studies. And so whenever you can, to try to streamline those studies, that it'll make it easier, more possible for those participants to be part of your study. If this is a pharmaceutical study, if you can make the budget so that the compensation for their time and travel is there, or that you somehow are able to combine study visits so that there's actually a way for people who really want to be in a study so that they can. You may have a lack of connection with the study population. And you heard, if you were here early in the day, you heard the first two speakers talking about, they were from the advocacy groups, and making that connection to those advocacy groups is going to make a huge difference in order to hear what those potential participants need, look for, are hoping for from your research. Will not only make a difference in their lives, but it's going to make a difference in your life. It's going to recharge the way that you feel about your research. I'm sure whenever you've been at those meetings, when you've met the real people that are going to be in your studies, it makes a difference in how you feel. It just does recharge you. And when Jeff asked me to talk a little bit today, I was hesitant, because, to be quite honest with you, if I see 37 study teams each month, maybe one or two of them are doing research in rare disease. So I feel like I'm certainly not at all the expert in this, but I do know what works for most studies, and I know that we have a lot of additional strategies that we can help people use that they are not using, that they have not thought of. And some of the times when I have helped those rare disease studies with their recruitment, it's been very rewarding to me. I mean, I want you to be successful. Funding is going to be another thing, and it's always is. But funding for rare disease, you may even, the funding that you may need may be even of more importance, because you do want to be able to make sure that those people can get in. They're farther away, perhaps, than others. So let's see, am I going? So we talked about some of the challenges. There are opportunities as well. When you're talking about a rare disease, people that are affected by rare disease, the ones who are calling the 293 Hero line are beating down the door to get into your study. So while there are challenges, there are also opportunities. I don't think let's see. I'm trying to think whose study I was working. I was working on an inclusion body myositis study. It was Dr. Kissel, and I think he's gone. But we started getting phone calls for his study before his study was IRB approved. I had callers from well over 100 callers who were looking to find out information about a study that had not yet been IRB approved. They wanted to be put on a list, and they were calling the 293 Hero line. I hadn't even heard of inclusion body myositis yet. So there were some things that I really needed to learn there, and to be able to pass on to the study team that was going to be doing that study. There were 0 people registered in Research Match when this study launched. By the time the study took place, there were over 83 people registered in Research Match that were looking to be part of that study, and they only needed 8 people for that particular study. So I will say that the potential participants are very well informed and quite motivated. And then, as Dr. Parrott wants me to throw out there about social media, we can help you with social media placement. We can help you, particularly if your study is listed on Study Search, which you can find out more information about it on that little handout sheet. If your study's listed on Study Search, we can do some social media for you. In fact, some of the studies that we've done the social media for, we've had them ask us to back off because they've had quite a response to some social media placements. I can't guarantee that for every study. It doesn't happen for every study. But for the studies that it does, has quite an impact. And there was a study done, a recent study showed that when participants reported how they found out about studies, and this is recently, they reported that they learned of the study in the highest percentage from Facebook and from Google. So for us to ignore that those are the ways that people are finding us would be to our disadvantage. So basically, my final line is just call or email me. That's probably the best thing for you to do.
Very good. So I think in the interest of time, I'm not even going to worry about my slides. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about what we can do in informatics to try and help you, and I'm happy to have the slides distributed afterward. There's a lot of different capabilities that we have, but I'm going to focus in on recruitment since we're talking about that, and just tell you some of the opportunities we have, and then you can always follow up with me. So as you might imagine, electronic health records can be very helpful in a number of ways. So when it comes to recruitment, we have the ability to help identify cohorts that are in our system through a variety of reports that can be generated, either using the electronic medical record directly, of course, if there's appropriate approvals, or using various tools that we have that are fed by data from the electronic health record, like our data warehouse, but even more directly, if you all want to do de-identified queries to even know, do I even have a cohort available for a particular condition? How many patients might meet certain eligibility criteria, et cetera? There's a resource here called I2B2 that we've launched. Actually, it's a tool that was developed out of Harvard, and it's been disseminated now across multiple institutions. We have an instance of that, and you can obtain training and access to that relatively easily to be able to run your own de-identified queries to just see whether certain eligibility criteria are even going to match to a sufficient number of patients here. So that's part of what we can do. And there's other ways we can mine the data to help you identify cohorts, whether you're putting together a study or whether you've already got one and now you're looking for the cohort to pursue for recruitment. In addition to some of the tools that Rose alluded to, Study Search and others, the other things we can do within the electronic health record is we can actually do something that actually we pioneered. Actually, when I was at the Cleveland Clinic, we started this about a decade ago. It's been studied many times now, and it can be quite effective in certain studies, which is what's called the clinical trial alert. So we have the ability in a targeted way to be able to present to clinicians who happen to be sitting across from a potentially eligible patient an alert that basically tells them the patient you're sitting across from right now qualifies for a study, and then very easily allows them to click a button and send a message on to the study coordinator, who then can follow up with the patient. We have a lot of evidence that this can be effective if used properly. It's not appropriate for every study, but it certainly can be helpful, particularly actually in rare diseases. And again, we can target that. So that's a service that we can provide. And now we are just rolling out the functionality and getting all the approvals in place so that sometime later this year, we will be able to actually direct to patients via MyChart, which is their personal health record, their portal to their electronic medical record. We now are going to be able to deliver to them in their portal opportunities for studies. And that's something you should keep an ear out for. We're going to be rolling that out, I would think, in the next couple of months. We're just getting all the approvals in place to be able to do that. But technically, basically what happens is if you identify a particular cohort and you work with the team in informatics and IT, we can then deliver to the patient's MyChart in a tab that says, you seem to qualify for this particular study, and if you'd like to hear more, click this button. If you don't, that's fine. Those are just some of the things that we can do in IT and informatics, and so I'll just give you a taste of that. And what I'll do is I'll have Jeff, after the meeting, send around contact information for our directors. But if you want to jot it down for queries that you want to run and getting access to I2B2, you're going to want to reach out to Josh Yoder. So that's josh.yoder, Y-O-D-E-R, at osumc.edu. If you want access to the things we can do through IHIS, through the electronic medical record, you're going to want to reach out to Jeremy Harper to learn more about that. But in fact, it's easier than all of that. All you really need to do is, and of course you can work with Rose, and Rose can direct you to these resources. But even easier than all that, if you go to, if you want to initiate the request for any of these things, you can go to the CCTS website and you can go to our computerized research record and basically just put in a request. You open a ticket, you put in a request, and people will contact you and then begin the process of working with you to figure out what's the right approach. All right? That's it.
Questions? 1 minute? Yes?
I have a question. So in your patient recruitment services, do you leverage the entire CCTS structure nationally, or is it?
Well, Research Match does, because that's a national database. So that would, yes. Study Search is listings of studies that are available, that are seeking volunteers currently at OSU and actually children's as well. So children's studies are listed there. And the positive thing about Study Search is that we put it in plain language. So it looks like, and we get anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 hits on that each month from the general public. That's available to the general public. So depending on, whether or not people are looking for something, but it's written in plain language, and you don't need IRB approval specifically to have your study listed on Study Search, as long as your study is IRB approved.